My name is Aaron. I'm going to be talking about my comic book database, which is my final project for our class. So I own a collection of about 3,000 comic books, and sometimes it's difficult to keep them all in order. It would be nice to have some sort of a tool to help me track them. So for this course, I decided to make my project into one that makes a database to manage a personal collection of comic books. So the requirements that I wanted for this was that it should maintain a collection of arbitrary comic book issues. It should also maintain any copies of those comic book issues that I currently own. So a comic book issue is different from an actual copy of a comic book, what I call an owned issue inside as my table inside of this. The two are different concepts. I may or may not own any copies of a particular comic book issue. And finally, it should maintain comic book metadata. So stuff like the publishers, any characters that may appear in comics, authors, artists, stuff like that. I used MySQL Workbench 6.3 and MySQL 5.7 to actually for my command line interpretation. So here is a picture of my ERD. So there's 12 total entities here, and the main two are the issue, which the issue entity, which is a strong entity. This is every single comic book maps to one of these tuples. Addition to that, the second important one is the owned issue. This is a weak entity dependent on the issue. It doesn't make sense for an owned issue. I can't own an issue of a particular issue unless the issue exists. In addition to that, I have some metadata entities. I have the publisher metadata entity. This is a strong entity that holds the publisher. I also have series. What is the series of the comic book? Like, is this The Amazing Spider-Man, or is this Uncanny X-Men, or what is this? I also have the characters, so these would be actual characters. So for instance, Wolverine or the Incredible Hulk, they might appear in comic books. And I also have creators down here. So what the creator is each comic is drawn by one or more artists, and it's also written by one or more authors. But sometimes a single issue can both be written and drawn by the same person. So to avoid redundant data, I made a creator table down here, and then use many-to-many relationships for the artists, which is Drew issue, and the wrote issue, which is for authors. And then, so I have some enumeration entities like we just discussed, Drew issue and wrote issue. There's also is in, how many which characters are in a particular issue. That's a many-to-many relationship as well. And then I have some enumeration entities, which exist just to keep data from being repeated too much. I have series types. So this is like a mini series of comics versus an annual, or versus a regular monthly series type. I have cover type. Most cover types are just regular, but occasionally you get a variant cover. And then I have grade. Grade here refers to the quality of the comic books. So like poor or mint or excellent, something like that. I'll go through this more in just a second. Here is some examples from my data dictionary, not the full thing, but just some to give you a flavor of what my data dictionary consists of. I want to point out that I relied heavily on MySQL's data types to enforce invalid entry constraints. So SQL is very nice in the sense that it has many data types, and I tried to use as many as I could to really restrict bad things. So here, for instance, grade is just an enumeration table. And so you can see over here, I have 5 different values of grade: poor, fine, good, excellent, and mint. Issue down here is sort of the main table, if you will, in the database. Each one has an issue ID for the primary key, an issue number, what is the actual number it is, what series did it come from is mapped with the series ID foreign key, cover type, a published year, what year was that issue published in, cover price, and details. The bottom 3 are optional, as specified or shown by the not null constraint. And for each one, you can see over here, well, we can see in the data type column, I did like decimal 13.2 unsigned to help really specify that the cover price has to be a positive floating point with 2 decimals, and so forth. Owned issue is another example down here. Owned issue is how of a particular issue. It's a do I own any of them? So this is a dependent one. It is a one-to-many relation with respect to issue. You can see the primary key consists of an owned ID as well as an issue ID. I also have a grade, once again, which is poor, fine, good, excellent, or mint. This is just picking up the enum. And I have a purchase price, which is also optional. The data types in MySQL are sufficient for restricting all of my data entries. The only one I had to add an extra trigger for was the publish year. So right over here, publish year, I added an extra trigger to ensure that you didn't enter a publish year that was more recent than whatever the current year is. We're in 2016, so if you try to enter a publish year made in of 2017, it should hopefully, it will give you an error here. My DDL and DML, my DDL was generated by MySQL Workbench. I'll show you that in just one second, but I made no changes to it whatsoever. It worked out of the box. And for the DML, I entered a toy DML, which I'll also show you in a second. It has 2 publishers, 5 characters, 6 series, 5 creators, 16 issues, and 20 owned issues. So let me branch out here and show you my DDL. So this is my DDL you're looking at here. Once again, this is straight from MySQL Workbench. I made no changes to this whatsoever. It was sufficient for what I needed. My DML over here, you can see I manually wrote this up. For series type, there's 2 types of series, monthly and mini series. Cover type, most of them are regular, but occasionally you have a variant. My grades are poor, fine, good, excellent, and mint. There's toy here, Marvel and DC. In terms of characters, I had Batman, Spider-Man, Wolverine, Superman, and the Hulk. For series, I had 6 different series here. Amazing Spider-Man, which isn't highlighting correctly, sorry. Uncanny X-Men, Dark Knight Returns, Man of Steel, Infinity Gauntlet, and Incredible Hulk. And I had 5 different creators, as you can see here, different artists and or authors. And then I had a bunch of issues that I put into my toy database, as well as a bunch of owned issues that I put into it. And then here are the many-to-many relations at the end. Drew issue, wrote issue, and is in. So let's now go back to my presentation. So an example query 1. So one thing you might want to do is, let's say I have a particular comic book series, in this case, Uncanny X-Men. And a very useful question would be, well, which issues do I own at least 1 copy of for that entire series? That seems like a useful query to make. So here's the query, how you would do it in terms of my database. You can see I'm joining together issue, series, and owned issue. And I'm basically, I'm looking for the series name Uncanny X-Men, and I'm essentially joining the series ID between the other, between issue and series, as well as the issue ID between owned issue and issue. And let me show you what that looks like in MySQL here. So here's my MySQL prompt. Let me go ahead and quickly load my DML. So I'm going to go ahead. Okay, my DDL is loaded. Here's my DML now loaded in. They are now both loaded. So now I'm going to run the first query to find out which X-Men comics I own one of. So I've now entered the command, and there you go. I own issues 1, 268, 269, and 270 of the X-Men. And let's see, here's a second query that you might want to do back in my presentation here. Now in this case, let's say most comic book characters have their own dedicated comic book series. Like for instance, the Incredible Hulk is always in the Incredible Hulk series. So the character Hulk appears in Incredible Hulk in every single issue. But what's more rare is what are the issues where the Hulk appeared that were not the Incredible Hulk? Like for instance, did the Hulk ever appear in an Amazing Spider-Man comic book? That is a useful question, and one that collectors would like to know the answer to. So here's the query that will do that. So in this case here, I've got a I'm going to print out the series name as well as the issue number. I'm doing some joins here between the issue and the series and the character. You notice that I had to escape character here because character is a reserved word in MySQL. And then finally the is in. Remember that the is in is the many-to-many relationship between character and issue. So my constraints down here, I'm looking for the character, the Hulk, and the remaining constraints are basically mapping me to an issue that is showing that has the Hulk in it. And then I'm going to look for a series that is not the Incredible Hulk. So let's see what that looks like in MySQL. So here is that query once again. So let me paste that in here. Okay. So there's the results. So the Incredible Hulk appeared in Amazing Spider-Man 328. He also appeared in Infinity Gauntlet number 4. Okay. And I think I have time for one more, possibly. Query number 3. So here lists the series name and the image number, as well as the number of owned copies that I have of any comic book issues that I happen to own more than one comic of. So some comic book issues are very valuable, and as a collector, I might collect more than one copy of that particular issue. And maybe I want to sell one of those for some reason. I need money and I would like to sell one of the ones that I have more than one copy of. So can I query my database to find all comic book issues that I own more than one copy of? And the answer is yes, you can. And this is more of a subquery one you can see here. So what I'm doing here is first I'm going into the owned issue table, and from that I'm issue ID, and I'm going to look for ones where I have more than one of a particular issue. I'm going to count them up here. Okay, and once I've got those, then I can join that with issue and series and get the result of them all. And what it will print out ultimately are which comic books I have more than one copy of. So let's go to MySQL, and I will now paste the third query in, and we will see. Okay, so there's the third query. So there you go. Uncanny X-Men 268, I own 2 copies of that issue. Dark Knight Returns, issue number 1, I own 3 copies of that one. That was actually a very valuable one. And Incredible Hulk 340, I happen to own 2 copies of that. So that's pretty much all of my time. That's my overview of my database. Thank you for listening. I learned a lot this semester. Thank you so much.